This is Caen behind me, and farther than that is Sword Beach, 10 miles farther. Now you'll be thinking, this video is supposed to be about Villers Bocage, why we're here at Caen. We're here to set the context. The Caen was supposed to be taken on D-Day by the 185th Brigade. That didn't happen because the 21st Panzers, although they were held up for hours, they started moving in late afternoon from Saint-Pierre-sur-Dive, which is that direction. They came towards Caen, but then they had to go round to the west because Caen was full of rubble, and they had headed towards Sword Beach. They came up against the British at Berville, near Le Béziers. And over that way, we can see the top of the cooling tower, which was the steelworks at Colombelle, and behind that we can see a ridge, which is the ridge of Bavant Wood. That became the front line for the British Commandos and the British Airborne for 6 weeks. And the 7th Armoured Division had landed by the evening of the 7th. Now they were to sweep down to Villers Bocage, which is over 15 miles over that way, take the high ground near Eversea, which is over there, Field 112, and then sweep down to Thury-Harcourt. The 1st British Airborne were to land in the vicinity of Eversea to help the 7th Armoured Division, and also to stop the 21st Panzers coming out of Caen westwards. However, Lee Mallory refused to carry the 1st Airborne. He said it was too dangerous for his pilots. Montgomery called him a gutless bugger. But anyway, the 30th Corps got bogged down against the Panzer near Tilly-sur-Seulles. So on the 10th of June, Montgomery had another plan. He was going to bypass the 21st Panzers by coming round the east of Caen, past Colombelle. But the trouble is, in war, the enemy has its own agenda, and on the 10th of June, the Germans had planned a counterattack into the airborne sector, so that nipped Montgomery's plan in the bud. A remarkable event did happen on the 10th. Thanks to the Ekin machine, an Ultra, the Allies knew exactly where Panzer West headquarters was, in a chateau near Thury-Harcourt, which is down that way. And they attacked it with bombs and rockets, and General Darwin and 17 other staff officers were killed, and General Schwettenberg was badly wounded, and all their communications were kaput. So that struck a great blow to the Panzers. The 30th Corps were bogged down against the Panzer near Tilly-sur-Seulles. Now the plan was hatched for the 7th Armoured Division to make a right hook, come through Villers Bocage, which is where we are now, to attack Caen, and the 1st Airborne Division would be sent in to exploit their success. Now the fog of war often accounts for discrepancies in accounts of actions. I don't think that accounts for the discrepancies in who thought of this idea. Montgomery always said it was his idea, and so did General Dempsey. General Bucknell of the 30th Corps, he said he thought of it, and so did General Erskine, the commander of the 7th Armoured Division. Anyway, the plan was hatched. The 8th Hussars set off from Jerusalem around 1600 on the 12th. Well, they came up against the German anti-tank gun at Livry. By the time the Germans had been sorted out, it was nearly 8 p.m. So Brigadier Hine decided to stop for the night. At 5:30 on the 13th, the advance continued with the 4th County of London Yeomanry leading. They got to Villers Bocage with no resistance and went through the town, with the locals coming out to cheer them through. Our HQ stopped here on the outskirts of the town, while A Company continued straight up towards Point 213, accompanied by the vehicles of the 1st Rifle Brigade. Now we're here more or less on the top of Point 213. You see the road comes up from Villers Bocage. It would have gone straight into Villers Bocage. You can see the motorway crossing it, so they've modified the road. This is where all the vehicles are parked. Now 3 half-tracks brought the platoon commanders up to the top of the hill to have an orders group. Most of the vehicles were parked off the road, so leave the left-hand side of the road free for the vehicles of the officers to go up and down. Now here we're looking up to the top of the hill, and the commander of the leading Cromwell, Lieutenant Garrett, he saw a German staff car coming from the car direction, and he fired at it with a machine gun, and the car slewed off the road and caught fire. So up to now, the plan was going very smoothly. On D-Day, there were no Tigers in Normandy. The nearest Tigers were near Belgium, and that was the 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion. They were told to move to Normandy to back up the Fusiliers. And the first elements, Company 2, led by Michael Wittmann, arrived here on the evening of the 12th. Now there's the road where A Squadron was parked, and just here, 200 yards away, were 5 Tigers. Now the Tigers had had to use the roads because the rail network had been sabotaged by the resistance, and coming all that way in a 60-ton tank took a great toll on the engines and the suspension. And Wittmann's tank had broken down on the way, so he was here without his tank. 6 tanks had arrived, and 2 of those had problems. On the morning of the 13th, Lieutenant Wessel had gone off with his tank to join the Fusiliers. So there were just 5 here, and 2 with problems. So Wittmann heard the tanks, the British tanks, grinding up the hill. They were surprised. They'd spent the night peacefully here, but they were surprised that the British were already here. So Wittmann jumped into a tank, and it was one that wouldn't work. So then he jumped into the next tank. It was Lieutenant Soda's tank, and he left him there to tell the others what to do, and he went off to attack the British. Now he went that way, and the other 2 tanks went that way. Now there are differing accounts as usual on what happened. I believe that Wittmann came down that track. The tanks had been over there. The British column was up here, so he was at the back of the column. He attacked the first tank he met, which was a Cromwell, from the back, and the next tank was a Firefly. A Firefly was a tank that could take on the Tiger. The Firefly was traversing its turret because they were facing the other way, and Wittmann hit it, and the tank brewed up and slewed across the road, blocking the road, so stopping any vehicles coming down the road or any vehicles going up the road to help the men. So then he turned, they went down back towards Villers Bocage, and there was the vehicles of the 1st Rifle Brigade there, and he attacked those and then carried on into Villers Bocage. Now the other 2 Tigers came up the lane, which is parallel to the road, comes up over there. They came across this land here. Now they were at the head of the column. They could go down the road, firing at all the tanks and half-tracks, and it was those 2 that knocked out this column. Now during the Tigers' rampage, many of the men had left their vehicles to take refuge in the ditches and the fields. But as soon as the Tigers had stopped firing, Panzer Grenadier troops turned up to round up the men to be prisoners. One man was decided not to be taken prisoner. It was Captain Milner. He was helping the crew of a Cromwell, and then when the fighting died down, he saw some men in the middle of the road with berets on. He was walking towards them, and he suddenly realised they were German tank crew. So he dashed through the hedge into the field over there, and instead of running down the hill towards where the British were, he was running up the hill, the other side of the hedge. And there was a German in the road running parallel to him, saying, "Englishmen surrender, Englishmen surrender." And then the German stopped to talk to a driver in a Volkswagen, and Milner thought it was his time of glory. So he stood up, he was going to spray him with his Sten gun. But as often happened, the bloody thing jammed. So Milner decided it was time to get away. So he went down that lane there, and his advance was hindered by smoke shells fired by the British, who they thought that'd be help anybody to get away. And he finally laid down, slept a bit, waited till night time, and then he came back towards the road, he crossed over the road and he thought they were going to use the track where the tigers had been to get to the south of Villers Bocage and back to the British, and he managed to do it. You can imagine the shock of the British troops. They'd come through Villers Bocage, being cheered by the people, no resistance. Come up this hill, no resistance. They were just parked by the side of the road, relaxing, waiting for their officers to finish their meeting. And suddenly there was a tiger right in their midst. After having shot up the vehicles of the 1st Rifle Brigade, Wittman came into town, and there was the stewards here who were no match for anything. They were soon burning. Then there was a group of Cromwells, and Captain Dias was with all the others trying to reverse. But the Cromwell is a very fast tank going forwards, but going backwards it's very slow. Captain Dias managed to reverse into a garden, which was about where that bend is, and he saw the tiger go past with its flank exposed, but he couldn't fire at it because his gunner had gone to relieve himself. So Captain Dias decided that once the gunner came back, they'd follow the tiger down the road into town and they'd attack its weak rear end. B Squadron was just entering the town from the west, led by Sergeant Lockwood's Firefly. They'd been warned by Colonel Pierce of the situation. Lockwood could just see Wittman's tiger coming down the end of the street, and he fired at it. Now the Firefly had a formidable punch, but when the gun fired, all the crew covered their ears and closed their eyes. And when they could open their eyes again, it was difficult to see where the shell had hit. But anyway, Wittman, seeing that there was a dangerous tank at the end of the road, realised he should turn around and went back towards Hill 213. Well, that was bad news for Captain Dias in his Cromwell. He'd been following the tiger. He wanted to attack the weak rear end, and now he found himself faced with the front end of the tiger. Wittman fired off a shell and the Cromwell exploded. Dias was thrown out the turret. Well, Wittman's luck was running out. As he approached the road to Bayeux, which is just where that water tower is, there was a 6-pounder anti-tank gun there. Now, a 6-pounder anti-tank gun couldn't do much more damage than a Cromwell's gun could, but they fired at Wittman's tiger and they knocked the track off, so the tiger was disabled. So Wittman and his crew, they got out, taking their personal weapons with them, and they went back to the Fusiliers headquarters at the Chateau d'Aubois. In the afternoon there was a fierce tank battle between the British tanks and the Panzers, which resulted in Villers Bocage being taken back by the Germans, and they held it till August the 4th. But it wasn't completely one-sided. A Mark IV and 6 Tigers were disabled during the battle. One particular incident is worth recounting. A Firefly was advancing down the main street and nearly got caught in a trap by a tiger. The commander happened to see through 2 windows that gave a view into the side street. He saw the tiger was waiting for him. He backed up the Firefly and he got a shot through both windows onto the tiger. The town was badly damaged, and then later it was completely flattened by the Allies bombing it. That's where all the buildings are post-war. So we see, as often happens, reality doesn't quite live up to the legend. Wittman initiated the attack against the A Troop, but he didn't knock out the whole column with just one tank, and he didn't participate in the battle in the afternoon, even though Nazi propaganda tried to make us believe that. Wittman never said he took part in battle, and if he had, he would have had to overrule his superior officer, Captain Mobius. Now, Wittman was active over the next 2 months during the Battle of Normandy, but no stories stand out until the 8th of August. So let's teleport to South of Caen again on the 8th of August. So here we are back again with a view over Caen. So just a reminder to give a thumbs up and tap the subscribe button and the bell if you haven't already, so you'll be informed of new videos. Another aside, just point out this field of linen or flax. Normandy is the biggest producer of flax in France. They make thread from it. They're sent off to China to do that. It's only in flower for about a week, so you're lucky to see the flowers. Anyway, over there we can see the hospital at Caen. That's just to the north of Caen, and it's by Point 67, which the British took on the 8th of July, just the day before they got half of Caen. And over that way you can see the cooling tower of the steelworks at Colombelles, and that's in the British airborne sector. Now, Caen was finally taken with Operation Goodwood on the 19th of July. So it had been taken, half of it had been taken on the 9th. The Germans did half the town till the 19th. So Operation Goodwood, they swept round the side, and the Canadians coming from the other side, and they took Caen, and the idea was to carry on to Falaise. But as I often say, that didn't happen. Anyway, Caen was taken on the 19th of July, and then they were planning Operation Totalize, and that was going to get Falaise. Now, Operation Totalize started on the night of the 7th of August, 11 o'clock at night, and the Canadians and the British had 700 tanks, and they were at Hubert Folly, which is just on the outskirts of Caen, and 11 o'clock at night they started off, and they were guided by cannons on the flanks firing tracer shells. So they were just to drive south, and hopefully they'd end up at Falaise. But being August, it was very dry, a lot of dust flying up, so some tanks were banging into other tanks. Some tanks went into craters, so it was rather chaotic. Of the tanks that did get to their objective, one was a troop with Ken Tout in it. They were in the Northampton Yeomanry. Ken Tout wrote several books. One of them was called Tank. It was about this incident. Another one was called the Battle for Tilly-la-Campagne, which is the village just over there, not to be confused with Tilly-sur-Seulles. He was in the Northampton Yeomanry, and their troop had Shermans and one Firefly. Now, the Firefly had a 17-pounder gun, which was practically equal to the German 88mm gun, and the Firefly could knock out the Tiger. Now, they set off from Hubert Folly, which is just a few miles over that way. They set going south, came along this road. They were taking fire from the Germans over here, nothing serious. They carried on. Their objective was Saint-Aignan-de-Crémenil, and they arrived there in the early morning of the 8th. So in the early morning they arrived on this ridge at Saint-Aignan-de-Crémenil. Now, one of the tankers saw a German across the valley in the woods there. The German had left his group of soldiers, and he dropped his pants to relieve himself. Now, he could have taken a pot shot at him, but you can't shoot somebody in that position, so he survived that particular time. Now, the terrain's changed quite a bit since 1944. There were orchards here at the time, but Joe Ekin's tank was probably round about here. You see, from here you've got a good view onto the main road over there. There's the Chateau of Gaumesnil. Around midday, 5 tigers were seen coming down parallel to the road over there towards Caen. And when they came into range, Joe Ekin fired at them. He knocked out at least 3. Now, he didn't know at the time, but these were the tanks of Michael Wittmann. And this is where Michael Wittmann was killed. Now, for many years, Joe Ekin was credited as having killed Michael Wittmann. Trouble is, Michael Wittmann's tank was just outside the range of Joe Ekin's Firefly. And here's a photo of what happens when a tiger is just a bit too far away. Now, this road has changed shape since 1944. The bit we can see was like that, and in 1944 it went straight across where the fields are now towards the buildings over there. Now, there were 3 tigers along here. There were 2 to the left there, and then 1 to the right of the road. And they were in range of Joe Ekin, who was just over there where those woods are. So there's the Chateau of Gaumesnil. And Wittmann's tank was just here by this building. And over there in the distance is where Joe Ekin's tank was. The other 3 tigers were in between here and there. So Wittmann's tank was a bit far away from Ekin to be hit by Ekin. But if it wasn't Ekin, who did it? But just the other side of the road, see, there's the Chateau of Gaumesnil. So across there is where Wittmann's tank was, and just here is the Chateau of Gaumesnil. You see, there's still a wall along here. In 44 the wall was a lot longer. It went along this way. And behind the wall were the Shermans of the Sherbrooke Fusiliers, the Canadians. Now, they didn't have Fireflies, they had 75mm guns on their Shermans, but from that range they could knock out Wittmann's tank. Now, the question's even more complicated because some people say a typhoon hit it with a rocket, but there's no record of a typhoon flying over here on that day at that time. So I think it was the Canadians. This is Ken Tout from where Wittmann left. He was here with the infamous Kurt Meyer. There are still traces of the German occupation. Now, they didn't find Wittmann's body until 1983, when they redid the road to make it into a 4-lane highway from Fillers to Caen. They found a mass grave of German bodies. It was actually his wife that identified his body, because surprisingly enough, for a SS, perfect Aryan, he had a short leg, and so he had a built-up heel on one of his boots, and his wife recognised his boot. That's how she identified him. So then he was buried in the German cemetery at La Combe.